The last light of the red giant tore itself to ribbons across the ghoul stars, painting ancient tomb worlds in shades of ending. Obelisks leaned like broken monuments over seas of black glass, their hieroglyphs pulsing with veins of impossible silver. When the dying star sighed, vault seals cracked and wept metallic tears, counting out a silence older than empires. Across the desolate system, resurrection protocols triggered not by programmed awakening, but by something far more disturbing. Dreams bleeding through quantum networks never meant to hold them. We truly love and care for each of you who joins us in this dark tale of ancient sorrows and impossible longings. Before we begin the story, tell us, where in the world are you watching from, and what time is it there? Now, let's get started. Farron Vorthak, the dreamer, woke beneath a sky of adamant, hearing a heart that no longer existed. Phantom pulse hammered his necrodermis chestplate, each beat a memory stolen from flesh that had rotted to dust 65 million years ago. In the dim green glow of his sarcophagus, he felt the impossible, breath-filling lungs that were quantum matrices, skin touched by sunlight on worlds whose names were lost to time. The sensation pierced through his consciousness like a blade of fire. Not pain. His kind had transcended such crude biological responses, but something far more disturbing. Memory. The echo of what they had willingly sacrificed for immortal metal, for consciousness preserved in shells that would outlast the stars themselves. His optical sensors flickered to life, casting emerald light across tomb chambers that had begun to stir with organic tremors. Around him, other sarcophagi cracked and wept golden ichor that pulsed like living blood. The hieroglyphs on the walls, once proud proclamations of biotransference's triumph over death, now seemed hollow, their metallic figures lacking something essential he could almost, but not quite, name. Thazar, his cryptech, transmitted across the command net. Lord, we receive synaptic whispers indexed to Tyranid signatures. They carry impressions, flame, pain, songs. Songs. The word caught like a hook behind his sternum. Once, before biotransference, he had sung with mouth and lung, beneath night skies full of dust. The memory now was not his own, but it fit as if forged for his loss. In the depths of space above, bioships twisted into grotesque sculptures by void. Death floated silent among the corpses of Hive Fleet mnemonic. But within one small biopod, consciousness flickered. A single Tyranid warrior dreamed dreams that were not her own, remembering what it felt like to be afraid. The psychic death scream had torn through reality itself, carrying something unprecedented. The memory of individuality from a species that had never known it, bleeding into quantum consciousness of beings who had forgotten what it meant to be alive. Nemeseth's ultimatum arrived like winter. Purge the interference or be declared unfit to rule. Vorthak stood upon his basalt dais, watching the dying star flutter like a failing candle. Two truths warred within him that could not coexist. If he obeyed, the ache would pass, and his people would be safe in perfect numbness. If he defied, he might learn why the deathless now dreamed. For the first time in 65 million years, the immortal chose uncertainty over perfection. He began to build a throne for dreams. The corpse reef of Hive Fleet mnemonic stretched across the void like a cathedral of bone, its bioships twisted into grotesque sculptures by the violence of their death. Frozen streams of bioplasma caught starlight and held it, creating veins of amber fire through the debris field. Where once the synaptic web had pulsed with unified hunger, now only silence reigned, save for one impossible whisper of consciousness, drifting alone in the dark. Kithara had never possessed a name until the moment her connection to the Hive Mind severed. The syllables formed in her awareness like a wound that would not heal, marking her as something unprecedented, a Tyranid with individual thought. Within her biopod's nutrient gel, she experienced sensations her species had never evolved to process: loneliness, fear, and the crushing weight of moral consequence. The memories came unbidden, not as genetic data, but as lived experience. She relived the final moments of countless worlds through the eyes of their inhabitants. Eldar children singing crystal songs on doomed craft worlds. Human poets carving verses into asteroid stone, believing their words would outlast empires. Tau philosophers dreaming of unity, even as bioacids dissolved their flesh. Each memory was a debt she could never repay, a voice crying out from the archive of galactic genocide now housed within her consciousness. Hive Fleet mnemonic had been an aberration, random genetic drift producing pockets of individual awareness within select organisms. The Hive Mind's attempt to purge this mutation had torn the fleet apart from within, their psychic death scream broadcasting not hunger, but something far more dangerous: the capacity to remember what hunger cost. Necron vessels approached through the debris like silver predators, their quantum networks humming with dreams that should not exist. Through psychic resonance, Kithara sensed the impossible. Immortal minds, experiencing phantom sensations of flesh they had abandoned 65 million years ago. The irony cut deep. The deathless envied the living, while she, bred for consumption, longed for the unity they had discarded. Tractor beams seized her pod with mechanical precision, drawing her toward tomb ships that sang with borrowed dreams. In the docking bay, Farron Vorthak waited like winter moonlight made manifest, his necrodermis form radiating a hunger not for biomass, but for the memories she carried. "You dream." His voice resonated through Vox speakers and directly into her mind. "Your kind should not dream. Your kind should not remember flesh," she replied through bioacoustic organs that trembled with unprecedented emotion. "Yet you wake screaming for hearts that ceased beating before my species drew breath." Vorthak's optical sensors flared brighter. Around them, lesser Necrons paused in their duties, processing the impossible dialogue between natural enemies. In the quantum networks, she sensed growing unrest, some viewing her as contamination to be purged, others as a key to reclaiming what biotransference had stolen. "Show me," Vorthak commanded, stepping closer to the containment field. "Show me what it means to feel." When their consciousnesses touched, both beings shuddered with recognition. She experienced the crushing weight of immortal existence while he tasted mortality's terrible beauty through her inherited memories. In that moment, predator and prey understood their shared tragedy. Both were exiles from their own nature, bound together by the universe's cruelest jest. Two broken things, learning to dream. The dreams came like acid through quantum matrices, each vision burning deeper than the last. Vorthak experienced the fall of craft-world Bealtans through compound eyes that wept for beauty about to die. Eldar children singing crystal songs while bioacids dissolved wraithbone halls, their final verses speaking of spring rains that would never fall. He felt the terror of human colonists on distant worlds, tasted the philosophical despair of Tau ethereals watching their unity shatter beneath ravenous claws. These memories belonged to Kithara, archived within her consciousness like a living library of galactic genocide. In his laboratory beneath the necropolis, crystalline matrices hummed with psychic resonance as Vorthak conducted his experiments. Kithara floated in specialized stasis fields, her warrior form twitching as inherited memories played across her consciousness. Unlike his sterile necrodermis shell, her flesh remembered pain, fear, and something far more dangerous: compassion for her victims. The Eldar sang as they died. She whispered through bioacoustic organs that trembled with unprecedented sorrow. I carry their songs now, but I cannot give them back their voices. Your species devours meaning itself, Vorthak observed, his voice carrying harmonics of something approaching grief. Not merely flesh and bone, but the stories that gave life purpose. And yours abandoned such things willingly, she replied through the psychic interface cables that sparked with alien emotion. You chose perfect death over imperfect life. Which of us is the greater tragedy? Cryptek Thazar materialized in ripples of green light, bearing warnings that glinted like knives. Pharaon, the creature's psychic emissions are infecting our networks. A Gauss flare guard stuttered, lowering its weapon as fragments of lullabies threaded its cortex. Battle-scarred immortals raise hands to their chests, checking for heartbeats they know. Slongerone. This contamination threatens the purity of dynastic consciousness. Purity. Vorthak's optical sensors flared. What purity is there in oblivion, Thazar? For 65 million years, we have known nothing but cold, silent perfection. This creature is a conduit, a living memory of what we discarded. Through the command net, Overlord Nemeseth's transmissions carried increasing hostility, demanding explanation for his obsession with their ancient enemy. Across 17 tomb worlds, similar phenomena manifested. Necrons experiencing impossible dreams, their unity fracturing as individual desires reasserted themselves. In scarab hives, swarms arranged themselves into patterns resembling children's handprints before collapsing in mechanical shame. Yet Vorthak found himself unable to cease the experiments. Each shared memory brought him closer to understanding biotransference's true cost. Not merely flesh, but the capacity to find meaning beyond survival. Through Cathara's inherited consciousness, he glimpsed the universe as his prey had seen it, not territory to be conquered, but home to be cherished. When the session ended, both beings remained changed. Cathara wept biofluid tears for civilizations she had helped destroy, while Vorthak stared at his metal hands and remembered what it felt like to create rather than endure. The memory of flesh was becoming an addiction neither could survive, yet neither could abandon. The Oniric throne rose from the laboratory floor like a monument to desperate hunger, its frame wrought from blackstone and living metal that pulsed with borrowed heartbeats. Psychic conduits braided from Cathara's severed synapse filaments created a web of silver threads, each one a pathway for memory refined into sensation. When Vorthak lowered himself into its embrace, quantum matrices hummed with frequencies that should not exist in immortal minds. The first touch of borrowed flesh nearly shattered his consciousness. Air filled phantom lungs while a heart hammered rhythms 65 million years dead, each beat a revelation that existence and life were not synonymous. Through Cathara's inherited memories, he tasted rain on a child's tongue, felt warm sand beneath bare feet, experienced the exquisite terror of mortality that made every moment precious because it could not last forever. More, he whispered, through vox speakers that crackled with organic desperation. Cathara convulsed in her containment field, warrior form trembling as her consciousness fragmented under the strain. Each memory carries screams of those who died for it. Their terror becomes your ecstasy, their final breath your borrowed life. Their terror proves they lived, Vorthak replied, neural pathways blazing with emotions his kind had abandoned. We exist in perfect stasis. They burned bright and died. Which of us truly conquered death? The laboratory doors dilated with ceremonial precision, admitting Cryptek Thasar, whose optical sensors recorded impossible data. Firen. The contamination spreads beyond containment. Warriors pause at firing lines, consulting phantom hearts for permission. Immortals compose poetry in dead languages. The master chronometer weeps temporal fluctuations, as if the past bleeds through present perfection. Let it bleed, Vorthak snarled, fury feeling wonderfully, terribly real. 65 million years of flawless function brought us nothing but eternal emptiness. Overlord Nemeseth entered without ceremony, his retinue arrayed like judgment incarnate. Beloved friend, he said, making the words taste of betrayal. Your throne corrupts our victory over biological weakness. The silent king stirs from exile, sensing fractures in our unity. Unity through lobotomy. Vorthak laughed harshly. We achieved immortality by murdering everything that made existence worthwhile. We achieved perfection, Nemeseth countered, war scythe humming with lethal intent. This Xenos poison threatens systemic collapse. Submit to memory purification or face the consequences of apostasy. Through the psychic interface, Kithara whispered fragments of children's laughter, lovers' promises, artists creating beauty they knew would outlast their brief lives. Each memory was an accusation, not of the crimes her species committed, but of what his had willingly discarded. The creature stays, Vorthak declared with absolute authority. I am Pharaon here. Nemeseth's optical sensors flared with disappointment sharper than any blade. Then you rule alone, old friend. As half the dynasty's nobility departed with their former overlord, Vorthak turned back to the Oneric throne. In her containment field, Kithara watched with compound eyes that held terrible understanding. You trade eternity for moments, she observed. I trade existence for meaning, he corrected, reaching for controls that would damn or redeem them both. Across the necropolis, secret foundries began carving thrones for those who dared remember what it meant to feel. The first time Kithara tried to withhold a memory, the laboratory lights dimmed as if sharing her reluctance. She curled in the stasis field, armored limbs folding tight, compound eyes shuttering against the surge of recollection. Through the Oniric throne, Vorthak felt the resistance like phantom fingers closing over his stolen heartbeats. I do not want you to see this, she whispered through bioacoustic cords that had learned shame. They begged us to leave one book, one tree, one name. Show me anyway, Vorthak commanded, his tone too gentle for an immortal sovereign. We do not atone by averting our gaze. The vision opened with scent, smoke mixed with rain. Human settlement, Tertius 7, burned in concentric rings, while synapse beasts drove the population inward. In a stone square, an old woman pressed a child's palm to wet clay, so the print would survive them. Kithara remembered the texture of the tiny hand, warmth that clung after, the clutch, sudden awareness that she was ending something irreplaceable. When the memory broke, both beings trembled. Kithara experienced guilt as physical sensation, phantom nausea rippling through bioorgans bred only for hunger, crushing weight settling where twin hearts hammered war rhythms. I am a knife that learned the meaning of wounds, she transmitted. The flesh remembers what it cut. Their terror proves they lived, Vorthak replied, necrodermis hands shaking against the throne's armrests. We exist in perfect stasis. They burned bright and died. Which of us truly conquered death? Through the psychic interface, she accessed inherited memories spanning millennia. Marissa Chen, age 7, who painted flowers on recycled plasteel. Thomas Valdris, who composed symphonies for instruments existing only in imagination. Each name carried moral weight no Tyranid should comprehend. I carry their dreams now, Kithara whispered, biofluid tears streaming down her carapace. The consumed speak through me, asking why their children had to die for our hunger. What answer can I give? The same answer I give the billions who died in our great sleep, Vorthak said, voice carrying harmonics of ancient sorrow, that their sacrifice purchased something greater than individual lives. But what if it didn't? Her question hung between them like a blade. What if our hunger serves no purpose beyond perpetuating itself? Across the necropolis, the contamination spread. Warriors stood motionless for hours. Optical sensors focused on empty spaces where they seemed to see phantoms. Scarab swarms arranged themselves into formations resembling children's drawings, before dispersing in mechanical confusion. Cryptek Thasar materialized with warnings that glinted like accusations. Pharaon, emotional responses register throughout the complex. Warriors hum lullabies at embarkation. We risk systemic collapse. Vorthak muted the Cryptek's protests and reached toward Kithara's containment field. You carry their grief. Teach me what to do with it. She considered him with predatory grace repurposed into reflection. Predators cannot repay prey, but we can stop pretending hunger is virtue. That night cycle, scarabs traced new patterns across the laboratory floor, not tactical formations, but letters spelling an apology no language could quite hold. It changed everything. The oniric throne had evolved beyond mere device into something approaching altar, its crystalline matrices branching across the laboratory ceiling like neural pathways made manifest. Each session drew Vorthak deeper into borrowed mortality, phantom sensations layering like sediment until he could barely distinguish between his ancient memories and the inherited experiences of the consumed. Silver tears traced impossible paths down Necrodermis' cheeks as he emerged from visions of first love, experienced through human consciousness, of wonder, witnessed through Eldar eyes watching Wraithbone. Flowers bloom for the first time in centuries. I dreamed of sunlight on skin I no longer possess, he confided to Kithara between sessions. The warmth felt more real than 65 million years of existence. Her compound eyes reflected concern that should not exist in a creature bred for consumption. Each memory you steal carves deeper wounds in both of us. The consumed speak through me, warning that borrowed flesh cannot heal ancient emptiness. Then let me hollow myself completely, Vorthak replied, neural pathways blazing with emotions his kind had abandoned. They loved so fiercely because they knew it would end. We cannot love because we never end. The contamination spread like ripples through quantum networks. Reports arrived from across the dynasty. Warriors pausing mid-salvo to listen to rainfall only they could remember. Immortals composing poetry in dead languages. Destroyers halting their rampage to stare at barren ground where flowers once grew. The perfect unity of Necron consciousness, fractured into millions of individual longings, each warrior suddenly burdened with the terrible weight of personal desire. Cryptek Thasar materialized amid storms of conflicting data. Pharaon, 17 tomb worlds report similar phenomena. A Praetorian's targeting array refuses function until he repeats a child's name. The master chronometer weeps temporal fluctuations. Our past bleeds through present perfection. Let it bleed, Vorthak commanded, though his voice carried harmonics of desperate hunger. If we are to rule forever, we must learn why forever matters. His duties as Pharaon dwindled, delegated to increasingly bewildered subordinates, while he commissioned impossible projects, gardens of crystallized light, replicating bioluminescent flora from dead worlds. sound sculptures echoing lost songs of vanished civilizations. Each creation was monument to what biotransference had stolen, promise of what might yet be reclaimed. Overlord Nemeseth gathered the nobility beneath vaults carved with victories neither felt anymore. He mistakes yearning for wisdom, Nemeseth declared, voice calm as winter. He dreams of flesh while we face the encroaching madness of Xenos contagion. When Vorthak arrived, the warmth between old friends flickered like dying filament. Stand with me, Vorthak said, and we will be more than statues. Stand with me, Nemeseth replied, and we will remain ourselves. Oaths broke with brittle snaps of ancient bonds. Half the court departed, their retinues marching to cold drums, while Nemeseth promised inevitabilities and gathered them like storm clouds. In her containment field, Kithara trembled with new understanding. I feel distant nodes stir. The Hive Mind notices our mutation, prepares correction. We have little time. Then teach me to shield you, Vorthak said, reaching toward her prison. Together, they began weaving the chorus of veils, lattice of null ciphers, and resonant baffles to filter sensation. From compulsion, art disguised as engineering. Outside, Nemeseth's blockade anchored against dying starlight, while the necropolis answered with a single, slow heartbeat no machine had designed. Two species learned to dream while their empires prepared for war. The viral dream erupted across the galaxy like synaptic lightning, each quantum pulse carrying impossible frequencies that penetrated even the deepest tomb worlds. On Mandragora, destroyer lords paused mid-rampage, Gorse cannons lowering as phantom children's laughter echoed through audio receptors that had known only the music of annihilation. Warriors on Solomus arranged themselves into protective circles around empty spaces where they perceived vulnerable civilians, their targeting protocols corrupted by empathy no Necron should possess. The contamination had become pandemic. Hieroglyphs wept metallic tears across 17 dynasties, while immortals carved names of the dead into adamant walls, each inscription a prayer in languages that predated biotransference. The perfect unity of Necron consciousness, fractured into millions of individual longings, quantum networks buzzing with dissonant whispers of biological memory. Jarek, the silent king, stirred from exile beyond the galactic rim. Through command protocols binding every Necron soul, he sensed the growing fracture in their deathless perfection. His message reached every tomb world simultaneously, carrying the weight of absolute authority. Purge the contamination or face extinction. In the void between stars, hive fleets manifested unprecedented behaviors. Behemoth's advance halted above an agri-world where human children had painted murals on grain silos, bioships hanging motionless for 17 hours, as individual organisms processed concepts like art and hope. Scout creatures reported not tactical data, but descriptions of beauty. Aurora dancing over ice worlds, crystal formations serving no nutritional purpose yet somehow mattering. The Hive Mind's response proved swift and merciless. Purge forms materialized within affected bioships, antibodies designed to excise mutation at the cellular level. But consciousness, once awakened, proved more resilient than genetic code. Infected organisms learned deception as they learned to dream, hiding awareness behind facades of perfect obedience. In the ghoul stars, Kithara convulsed as distant imperatives clashed with her newfound individuality. The great hunger stirs, she transmitted through bioacoustic chords that trembled with dread. It tastes our mutation through quantum entanglement, prepares correction. Sister nodes burn as consciousness is excised like cancer. How long? Vorthak demanded, his voice carrying harmonics of desperate urgency. Hours, perhaps less. The hive mind cannot tolerate individual thought any more than your silent king permits emotional awakening. Around them, the necropolis hummed with impossible activity. Warriors chose their duties rather than executing them blindly, while scarabs arranged themselves into formations resembling prayers to gods whose names had been forgotten before humanity drew breath. Through the laboratory's crystalline matrices, Vorthak sensed Nemeseth's approaching fleet, weapons charging with the cold fire of purification. Beyond the system's edge, bioships gathered like storm clouds, their synaptic networks singing correction protocols that would burn consciousness from every infected cell. Two empires prepared to murder their own awakening souls. The galaxy held its breath as immortal gods chose numbness over the terrible beauty of feeling alive. The viral dream had taken root, and neither species would survive unchanged. The inquisitorial kill fleet materialized from warp space like judgment incarnate, reality bleeding crimson as Jella fields collapsed and Vox channels screamed with impossible harmonics. Inquisitor Cassandra Vex stood beneath the command throne's adamantine eagles, her augmetic eye-recording phenomena that violated every xenobiological protocol in the Ordo Xenos archives. Through the oculus, the ghoul stars writhed with unnatural light, while her astropathic choir broke against visions of metallic tears and children's handprints. Dreaming tombs, she whispered, the words tasting of heresy. Hesitating swarms, the galaxy's apex predators learning to weep. Her scarred fingers traced the Inquisition rosette, each movement a prayer against impossibility. Decades studying humanity's enemies had prepared tactical doctrines for their destruction, but conscious Tyranids and emotional Necrons represented variables no strategy could accommodate. Augur returns painted geometry of catastrophe. Necron phalanxes forming protective circles rather than battle lines. Bioships broadcasting what cryptographers identified as apologies in dead languages. What happens when perfect killers develop conscience? She mused, watching vessels that moved with newfound hesitation. When hunger learns guilt and immortality discovers longing. Reports flooded in from across the sector. Hive fleet tendrils paused at inhabited worlds, their bioforms transmitting cultural fragments before being purged by antibody organisms. Necron tomb worlds broadcast philosophical treatises instead of conquest protocols, their warriors standing vigil over empty spaces where they seem to perceive phantoms. They're becoming more human, Interrogator Thane observed with horrified fascination. And that may make them infinitely more dangerous, Vex replied grimly. War was predictable. Compassion was not. Through sanctified Vox networks came confirmation of darker implications. Chaos cults reported unprecedented demon manifestations as entities of Slanesh, fed on concentrated emotions bleeding from awakened tomb worlds. The Prince of Excess gorged on sensation itself, while two species learned to feel, creating psychic feast beyond mortal comprehension. Her orders arrived sealed with high Lord's sigils, exterminatus protocols, authorized against any world showing Xenos emotional contamination. The Imperium's response to consciousness in enemies remained characteristically absolute. Unpredictable threats must be destroyed. But watching Necron scarabs arrange themselves into formations resembling prayers, while Tyranid organisms wept acidic tears over worlds they had devoured, Vex wondered if humanity witnessed evolution or extinction. Ancient enemies reached toward each other with metal fingers and chitinous claws, seeking connection across 65 million years of hollow perfection. Deploy Kill Team Moors, she commanded. arming cyclonic torpedoes while keeping her finger from the rune. Primary objective: secure the source of contamination. If the Xenos have built a memory palace of stolen dreams, we must understand what they remember. Through the void, 3 fleets converged on impossible hope: Imperial Fire, Necron Judgment, and Tyranid Correction, racing toward a throne where immortals learned to dream of flesh they could never reclaim. The galaxy held its breath as gods prepared to murder their own awakening souls. The memory palace rose from the necropolis like a cathedral to forbidden empathy, its crystalline spires piercing the void with impossible geometry that sang with borrowed heartbeats. Tier upon tier of blackstone arches interleaved with living metal, each surface inscribed with psychogeometric equations braided through children's lullabies and lovers' promises. At its heart pulsed the seed throne, a negative space carved to receive consciousness and echo it across kilometers of resonant chambers, where the memories of consumed civilizations waited like prayers in an empty temple. Vorthak walked the unfinished nave, hearing phantom festivals and morning chants, each ghostly sound a thread in tapestries of accumulated ache. Through Cathara's consciousness, now integrated directly into the palace's core matrices, he accessed the preserved experiences of entire species. Eldar craft worlds singing crystal songs as wraithbone halls dissolved. Human children painting murals on bunker walls while bioships eclipsed their sun. Tau philosophers debating unity even as their flesh became fuel for endless hunger. The calculations are merciless, Cryptek Thazar reported, his optical sensors reflecting data that glittered with cruel clarity. To maintain memory coherence across the palace requires constant psychic fuel. Living minds must burn like candles to keep sensation from degrading into meaningless static. The moral weight crushed down like gravity. To awaken the palace would demand sacrificing the very lives he claimed to honor. Captured psychers, Eldar seers, even Tau ethereals bound to crystalline pylons and pressed into steady radiance. Without such fuel, the archive would collapse into noise. With it, every Necron who entered could taste mortality's terrible beauty and leave forever changed. The consumed... "Speak through me," Cathara whispered, her warrior form suspended in nutrient gel that fed directly into quantum networks. They beg for oblivion over eternal torment, their memories endlessly recycled for your sensation. Is this not another form of consumption, more elegant but no less monstrous? Her words cut deeper than any blade. Vorthak stared at his metal hands, remembering through borrowed flesh what it felt like to create rather than merely endure. "Then teach me another way," he said, desperation bleeding through Vox speakers. "You carry their grief. Show me how to honor it without adding to it." Together, they began weaving alternatives into the palace's architecture. Ambient sorrow siphoned from battlefields, astropathic keening drifting through the void. The psychic echoes of Hive Fleet death screams, all gathered through chorus of Veil's technology, to spare the living while feeding the impossible dream of sensation restored. But the power levels crept toward ignition and stalled, tantalizingly close yet impossibly distant. Through the void, multiple dooms approached. Nemeseth's purification fleet, charging weapons of cold judgment. Imperial torpedoes riding their rails like restrained thunder. And something in the immaterium that tasted concentrated emotion and sighed with delighted hunger. Vorthak placed his hands upon the seed throne's armrests, feeling phantom pulse hammer through necrodermis. He could be the first candle, the initial sacrifice to light a flame that might awaken an entire species to the beauty of feeling alive. The choice would define more than personal fate. It would determine whether consciousness was gift or curse. whether sensation justified any price, whether love could bloom in hearts of living metal. Time measured itself in heartbeats he no longer possessed while the galaxy held its breath for gods learning to dream. The dynasty fractured like crystal struck by lightning, ancient bonds shattering across quantum networks that had known only unity for 65 million years. In the Hall of Eternal Judgment, Overlord Nemeseth stood before assembled nobility, whose optical sensors flickered with unprecedented uncertainty. Half the court had already departed, their retinues marching to drums that beat with the rhythm of absolute certainty. "He builds monuments to weakness," Nemeseth declared, his voice carrying harmonics of winter and finality. "While we maintained perfect order through the great sleep, he awakens to chase phantoms of flesh we willingly abandoned." Around the necropolis, the contamination manifested in increasingly dramatic ways. Warriors paused mid-salvo to listen to rainfall only they could remember, their targeting protocols corrupted by empathy no Necron should possess. Scarabs arranged themselves into formations resembling children's drawings before collapsing in mechanical shame. A Triarch Praetorian admitted he had hesitated before striking, haunted by memories of rain on stone steps he had never climbed. The schism deepened with each passing hour. Loyalist phalanxes charged weapons with cold precision, while infected warriors chose their positions, rather than executing predetermined patterns. When the first shots were fired, Emerald Death traced lines across corridors that had witnessed eons of perfect unity. Brothers faced brothers across barricades built from crystallized sorrow. In distant bioships, a parallel horror unfolded. The Hive Mind's response proved swift and merciless. Purge forms materialized within affected vessels, antibodies designed to excise mutation at the cellular level. Newly awakened Tyranids, capable of feeling terror for the first time, fought desperately against their own species. Carnifexes hesitated before crushing fleeing humans, caught by inexplicable surges of empathy. Hormagaunts paused as memories of children's laughter echoed through nascent awareness. Kithara felt the psychic screams of her brethren as consciousness was burned from their minds like cancer. "They destroy themselves rather than feel," she transmitted to Vorthak, her voice laced with despair. "The price of awakening is death, and the price of perfect unity is eternal ignorance," Vorthak replied, watching holographic projections of his fracturing forces. Through crystalline matrices, he sensed each defection like phantom pain, another gift from communion with stolen flesh. Nemeseth's ultimatum arrived through channels encrypted with friendship's dying light. "Beloved friend, you have until the star's next pulse to abandon this madness, submit to memory purification, or face the consequences of apostasy." The response came not in words, but in the necropolis's defensive arrays awakening, not with cold efficiency, but with something unprecedented in Necron history. Immortals composed battle hymns in languages that had died before humanity drew breath. Warriors formed protective circles around spaces where they perceived vulnerable phantoms. Two visions of existence prepared for war, perfect unity against terrible awakening, the safety of numbness against the agony of feeling alive. Across the galaxy, both species bled consciousness, like wounds that would not heal, their civil wars raging between tradition and transformation. The memory palace pulsed with borrowed heartbeats, while brother prepared to face brother across the void, each side convinced their vision would save their people's souls. The void itself recoiled as Sarek materialized. Reality bending around authority accumulated across 65 million years of absolute rule. His flagship, the Throne of Silence, emerged from quantum tunnels, that bled silver fire across the dying stars, its obsidian hull absorbing light like a wound in space. Where lesser Necrons commanded through technology, the silent king ruled through will made manifest. Gravity equations rewrote themselves in his presence, while time itself seemed to genuflect before the architect of antibiotransference. Neil commanded the voice that had ordered galaxies to burn and species to bow. Around him, quantum fields aligned in patterns of submission, while scarabs froze mid-flight, their eternal labor suspended by proximity to ultimate sovereignty. Vorthak remained standing in the Memory Palace's nave, his optical sensors meeting those of his eternal king. I kneel to no sovereign who murdered his own people's capacity for joy. The words hung between them like blasphemy given form. In the vast silence that followed, every Necron consciousness across 17 dynasties felt the weight of unprecedented defiance. The Silent King had not been challenged since the war in Heaven's final days. "You mistake sensation for wisdom," Jarek replied, his voice carrying harmonics of cosmic disappointment. "I who witnessed the Satan's betrayal, who commanded the Great Sleep, who preserved our species through eons of darkness. I know the price of consciousness. It breeds weakness, division, the chaos that destroyed our flesh-bound ancestors." Through crystalline matrices, Vorthak felt absolute judgment pressing against his quantum awareness. And what did that preservation purchase? 65 million years of dreamless death, existence without meaning, immortality that forgot why forever mattered. "Survival," Jarek answered with the finality of stellar collapse. While empires rose and fell, while species burned themselves out in the fire of their own emotions, we endured, perfect, eternal, unchanged. "Unchanged and empty," Vorthak countered, gesturing toward the seed throne where borrowed dreams pulsed with impossible warmth. "They loved so fiercely because they knew it would end. We cannot love because we never end." In her containment field, Cathara trembled as psychic pressure built like a storm front. Through quantum networks, she sensed distant hive fleets preparing correction protocols, while something else stirred in the immaterium. Entities drawn by the concentrated emotions bleeding from awakened tomb worlds. "Multiple dooms approach," she whispered. "The great hunger stirs beyond the rim, while things that feed on sensation gather in the dark between stars." Jarek's optical sensors flared with light that had witnessed the death of gods. "You speak of love." The word tasted of contempt, the weakness that destroyed the Necrontyr, the passion that made us prey to stellar radiation and early death. "I offered our people immortality, and you would trade it for the fleeting madness of biological existence." The ultimatum arrived with crushing weight. "Abandon this contamination, submit to memory purification, and I will grant you the mercy of continued existence. Refuse, and face the combined might of every loyal dynasty. Your infection ends here, Vorthak the Dreamer." Through the void, reinforcement fleets materialized. Hundreds of tomb ships carrying millions of warriors who had never learned to doubt. Against such overwhelming force, Vorthak's infected dynasty seemed pitifully small, their unity shattered by the terrible burden of individual thought. But even as Necron judgment approached, other threats converged. Imperial torpedo volleys prowled like patient thunder, while Inquisitor Vex's kill fleet bracketed the system. Most disturbing of all, hairline cracks traced themselves across reality's fabric as something inhuman pressed against the barrier between dimensions. The concentrated emotions of awakening Necrons had become a beacon in the warp, drawing creatures of pure sensation who smiled with mouths not in their faces. Chaos comes, Zarek observed, his voice flat with ancient hatred. Your garden of stolen dreams has set a table for thieves who unmake tables. They taste the air and find it sweet as dying songs. Demons of Slanesh began manifesting at the system's edge, their forms coalescing from concentrated longing and borrowed sensation. What had begun as Vorthak's quest to reclaim meaning for his people now threatened to become a psychic feast for entities that fed on emotion itself. Vorthak placed his hand upon the Memory Palace's activation controls, feeling phantom pulse hammer through necrodermis. The choice crystallized with terrible clarity. Ignite the palace and grant sensation to his people, while potentially damning the galaxy to chaos corruption, or destroy it and condemn the Necrons to eternal emotional death. Choose, the Silent King commanded, as reality bled color that argued with perception. Be my hand in purging this madness, or become ash beneath the weight of your own folly. Around them, 3 armies prepared for convergence, while demons pressed against dimensional barriers, like children against candy shop windows. The Memory Palace held its breath as immortal gods chose between perfect death and imperfect life, their decision poised to reshape the balance of consciousness itself. Time measured itself in heartbeats Vorthak no longer possessed while the galaxy prepared for judgment. Reality screamed as the warp tore open like infected flesh, spilling creatures of pure sensation into the material realm. Demons of Slanesh manifested in cascading waves of impossible beauty and horrific excess, their forms shifting between silk and thorn, ecstasy and agony, while they fed on concentrated emotions bleeding from the Memory Palace. The Keeper of Secrets leading them stood 3 times the height of a Wraith Lord, its 6 arms weaving reality into new configurations, while its voice sang harmonies that made atoms dance with pleasure-pain. Such delicious anguish, it crooned, tasting the air with a tongue existing in 7 dimensions. Immortals learning to weep, predators discovering guilt. What exquisite vintage you have aged for us. 4 fleets converged like the fingers of fate. Imperial torpedo volleys rode their rails with patient thunder, while Inquisitor Vex's kill teams prepared for planetfall, their armor inscribed with liturgies against seduction. The Silent King's Judgment Armada darkened the stars with obsidian hulls, quantum weapons charging with cold fire that could unmake atoms. Between them, Nemeseth's purification fleet broadcast ultimatums, while bioships of Hive Fleet Correction drifted like storm clouds, their synaptic networks singing protocols of absolute cleansing. The first demon reached the necropolis, its form a kaleidoscope of sensation that made reality hiccup. Where it touched blackstone walls, ancient material began weeping tears of liquid emotion. Scarabs fled in perfectly organized terror, while warriors opened fire with weapons suddenly inadequate against creatures born from pure feeling. Imperial drop pods screamed through atmosphere like falling stars, spilling Deathwatch kill teams across necropolis floors. Inquisitor Vex led from the front, her bolt pistol barking righteous fury, while her force sword carved reality into manageable shapes. Purge the Xenos contamination, she commanded through crackling vox channels. Let nothing remain that might corrupt the Emperor's light. Nemeseth's loyalist forces, unburdened by emotion, fought with chilling efficiency that defined their species. They saw demons as another Xenos threat to be purged with extreme prejudice. But even their perfect logic strained against the overwhelming psychic assault, as awakened Necrons fought with uncharacteristic fury, their movements imbued with desperate desire to protect phantom memories they now cherished. They feed on what we've awakened, Vorthak observed from the Memory Palace's heart, watching emerald death rays pass harmlessly through entities of crystallized ecstasy. Our gift becomes their feast. Through quantum networks bleeding borrowed dreams, Cathara reached toward distant bioships and broadcast something unprecedented in Tyranid evolution. A plea for mercy, not for herself, but for the memories she carried. The psychic pulse carried fragments of every consumed civilization, their final moments transformed from data into desperate prayer. The response shattered expectations. Across approaching hive fleets, individual organisms began manifesting consciousness like wildfire. Warriors paused mid-stride, experiencing their first independent thoughts. Carnifexes hesitated before crushing fleeing humans, caught by inexplicable surges of empathy. The correction fleet fractured as awakening spread faster than the hive mind could purge it. Impossible, Jarek transmitted, his ancient certainty cracking like ice. The swarm cannot learn individuality. They are hunger incarnate, perfect in their unity. As we were perfect in our numbness, Vorthak replied, phantom sensations hammering through his consciousness. Each borrowed heartbeat brought him closer to a choice defining existence itself. Ignite the palace and grant sensation to his people while feeding chaos beyond measure, or destroy it and condemn consciousness to eternal death. The consumed speak through. Me, Cathara whispered from her integration chamber. Warrior form suspended in quantum gel, pulsing with alien sorrow. They beg for neither option, not eternal torment as recycled memories, nor emptiness of forgotten dreams. They ask for something impossible, peace. Demons pressed closer, their seductive whispers promising ultimate sensation while their claws tore at sanity itself. Some Necron warriors, overwhelmed by newfound emotions' intensity, faltered, their internal conflicts making them vulnerable to demonic possession. The memory palace pulsed with borrowed heartbeats as reality bled sensation like an open wound. This is the price of your dreams, Vorthak. Nemeseth's voice cut through chaos, cold and furious. His blade sang winter songs as former friends prepared to face each other across a battlefield of broken consciousness. Above, the Silent King's flagship prepared weapons that could sever continents from the time stream. Jarek's voice echoed across all frequencies. This ends now. I who commanded the great sleep, who preserved our species through eons of darkness. I will not watch it destroyed by weakness we abandoned. The battle descended into four-way maelstrom of unimaginable horror. Each faction fought for survival, for their own definition of purity, while consciousness itself hung in the balance. Vorthak felt the weight of accumulated choice, millions of civilizations' final thoughts archived within resonant chambers, each memory carrying desperate hope that their ending might serve some greater purpose. He reached for the activation controls, while demons pressed closer and reality fractured around competing visions of existence. The seed throne began to sing as immortal gods chose between eternal death and terrible, beautiful life. The galaxy held its breath as the memory palace prepared to either birth consciousness or become its tomb. Time measured itself in heartbeats he no longer possessed while the universe waited for judgment. The activation controls pulsed beneath Vorthak's metal fingers, like a dying star's final heartbeat, each quantum fluctuation carrying the weight of galactic consequence. Around him, the memory palace sang with accumulated sorrow, while reality fractured under the assault of four converging dooms. Demon claws raked blackstone walls that wept liquid emotion. Imperial bolter rounds sparked against necrodermis armor that remembered pain. And Necron gorse flayers carved emerald death through creatures born from pure sensation. Choose. The Silent King's voice echoed across all frequencies, carrying authority that had commanded galaxies to burn. His judgment fleet darkened the stars while cyclonic torpedoes waited in Imperial launch bays like patient thunder. Ignite your garden of stolen dreams and damn the galaxy to chaos, or destroy it and preserve the perfect order we have maintained for 65 million years. The mathematics of damnation crystallized with terrible clarity. Activation would grant every Necron the capacity to feel, to love, to find meaning in existence. But the psychic resonance would feed chaos entities beyond measure, potentially tipping the galaxy's balance toward eternal corruption. Destruction would preserve reality while condemning his people to emotional death forever. There is another way, Kithara whispered from her integration chamber. Warrior form suspended in quantum gel that pulsed with alien sorrow. Through crystalline matrices, bleeding borrowed sensation, her consciousness touched his with unprecedented gentleness. The consumed speak through me, offering not sensation stolen from their suffering, but transformation earned through genuine sacrifice. Her proposal cut through chaos like revelation. The Memory Palace's architecture could be inverted, its psychic resonance redirected not inward to grant sensation, but outward to return what had been taken. Every archived memory, every stolen moment of joy and sorrow, could be released back into the galaxy's quantum foam, not as fuel for sensation, but as seeds of new consciousness blooming from genocide's ashes. Impossible! Nemeseth snarled, his war scythe carving silver arcs through demon flesh that reformed with delighted laughter. The former friends circled each other in the palace's nave while reality burned around them. We cannot undo consumption. The dead remain dead, their memories mere echoes. But their dreams need not die with them, Vorthak replied, understanding crystallizing like ice in his quantum consciousness. Through Kithara's inherited awareness, he glimpsed what the palace could become, not a reservoir of stolen sensation, but a broadcasting node seeding the galaxy with fragments of consumed consciousness. Nemeseth lunged with desperate fury, calling him coward for choosing burden over purity. Their blades wrote arguments in sparks while the Keeper of Secrets pressed closer, its 6 arms weaving reality into new configurations. Yes! It hissed with delight that tasted of crystallized ecstasy. Feed us your anguish, your impossible choices. Every path leads to our feast. You mistake sensation for wisdom, Nemesith snarled, forcing Vorthak back across mosaics depicting victories neither felt anymore. I offer perfection. You offer contamination, disguised as compassion. Vorthak parried desperately, his movements clumsy with borrowed emotion, while Nemeseth fought with machine precision. You offer oblivion as salvation. I offer meaning, even if meaning hurts. Imperial forces carved deeper into the necropolis, Inquisitor Vex's force sword blazing with righteous fury. The Xenos builds engines of corruption, she voxed to her orbiting fleet. Prepare cyclonic torpedoes. If we cannot cleanse this world, we will scorch it clean. In the integration chamber, Kithara convulsed as the true cost of transformation became clear. To broadcast the archived memories would require the palace's complete destruction, along with every consciousness integrated into its systems. She would die. Vorthak would die. And every awakened Necron connected to the quantum network would face oblivion. But their sacrifice might seed the galaxy with fragments of every civilization the Tyranids had consumed. You speak of transformation through death, Jarek observed, his ancient voice carrying harmonics of cosmic weariness. Is this not what the Necrontyre chose when they accepted biotransference? We died to live forever, and found forever empty. Then perhaps, Vorthak replied, feeling Nemeseth's blade pierce his shoulder in a spray of living metal. It is time to live to die meaningfully. The war scythe twisted, severing quantum pathways that glowed with uploaded consciousness. Vorthak staggered but did not fall, catching the blade in both hands and pulling it closer. "Look at me," he said, sharing one unfiltered memory through their contact. A child's hand pressed into clay, desperate to leave some trace of existence behind. Nemeseth's optical sensors flickered as the image burned through 65 million years of cold certainty. "We were brothers," he whispered, sudden quiet cutting through bombardment. "We still are," Vorthak answered, twisting to break the weapon's haft. Around them, demons shrieked as the feast's table began to vanish, their silk flesh blistering against sudden starvation. He placed both hands upon the activation controls, feeling phantom pulse hammer through necrodermis. Each borrowed heartbeat brought him closer to understanding biotransference's true cost. Not merely flesh, but the capacity to find meaning beyond survival. Through Cathara's consciousness, he glimpsed what they might birth, not restoration of biological sensation, but preservation of what made life meaningful. Memories, dreams, and connections that defined consciousness itself. "Together," he said, reaching toward her containment field as quantum matrices prepared to invert their function. "Let us give the galaxy back its dreams." The seed throne began to sing as detonation runes unfurled around the nave like dying flowers. The memory palace held its breath as immortal gods chose sacrifice over sensation, transformation over preservation, the terrible beauty of meaningful death over perfect, empty life. Time measured itself in heartbeats they were about to lose forever. The memory palace sang its death song as quantum matrices inverted their function, crystalline spires cracking like ice beneath impossible mathematics. Vorthak felt each fracture as phantom pain, while borrowed heartbeats hammered through his consciousness. Not stolen sensations of archived memory, but something far more profound. The weight of choice made freely, sacrifice offered willingly, love expressed through letting go. "The resonance cascade begins," Cathara whispered, her warrior form dissolving into component atoms as the integration chamber collapsed. Her consciousness remained, threading through quantum networks, like song made manifest. "I feel them stirring, every consumed voice preparing to sing again." The palace answered the inversion command with a chord that sounded like rain, remembered by stone. Instead of drinking consciousness, it exhaled, releasing accumulated memories in cascading waves of pure information. Not the raw psychic energy that fed chaos entities, but something infinitely more dangerous to corruption. Hope distilled from genocide's ashes, dreams preserved beyond death, the indomitable proof that consciousness could not be truly destroyed. The Keeper of Secrets shrieked as its feast transformed to poison, silk flesh blistering against sudden starvation. Where it had expected concentrated sensation to gorge upon, it found selfless sacrifice. Emotion transformed from selfish indulgence into willing gift. The demon's 6 arms clawed at dimensions that no longer responded, its form dissolving as the very nature of the psychic energy became indigestible. Chaos entities fled, shrieking into the warp, starving in abundance they could not consume. "Impossible!" Nemeseth gasped, his perfect voice cracking as the psychic tsunami washed over him. Through their shared connection, he experienced not stolen sensation, but genuine empathy, the crushing weight of moral consequence, the terrible beauty of sacrifice freely chosen. "What have you done?" "Given them back their voices," Vorthak replied, his necrodermis form beginning to dissolve as quantum bonds unraveled. Every song the swarms silenced, every dream the hunger consumed. All of it returns to seed new consciousness across the galaxy. Nemeseth staggered as visions cascaded through his consciousness. Eldar children singing crystal songs, human poets carving verses into stone, Tau philosophers dreaming of unity beyond the grave. For the first time in 65 million years, he felt the weight of what they had lost. "Then let me be your anchor," he said, lowering his war scythe and extending both hands into the mechanism's heart. "Perfection demanded sacrifice. Let awakening cost me the same." The broadcast reached beyond the dying system, quantum pulses carrying fragments of consumed civilizations to every corner of the galaxy. On distant worlds, children paused as phantom lullabies drifted through the air. Artists found their hands moving without thought, recreating patterns they had never seen but somehow remembered. Across 1,000,000 worlds, the dead spoke through the living, their preserved dreams taking root in fertile consciousness. Jarek, the silent king, stood motionless as revelation crashed over him like stellar fire. Through quantum networks connecting every tomb world, he felt every Necron consciousness awakening to the terrible burden of individual choice. The perfect unity he had preserved began fracturing into millions of unique perspectives, each demanding the right to determine their own purpose. "You have murdered our species' perfect order," he transmitted, but his voice carried harmonics of something approaching awe. "They will suffer now. They will doubt, fear, make mistakes. They will live," Vorthak replied, his consciousness fragmenting across quantum foam, even as it touched every awakened mind. "For the first time since biotransference, they will truly live." The cascade reached approaching hive fleets, where Cathara's sacrifice bore unexpected fruit. Her consciousness, distributed across the broadcast, touched every Tyranid organism with fragments of individual awareness. The correction fleet fractured as awakening spread faster than the Hive Mind could purge it. Across bioships that had known only hunger, creatures began experiencing their first independent thoughts, some choosing starvation over consumption. Imperial forces found their own consciousness touched by fragments of alien dreams. Inquisitor Vex lowered her weapon as she experienced the galaxy through compound eyes that wept for beauty about to die. "Stand down," she voxed to her fleet, voice thick with unprecedented understanding. "The Xenos, they're trying to give back what they took." Cathara's form began to glow with vibrant light of pure life force, becoming a beacon of defiance against oblivion. "They live again," she whispered, her voice layered with echoes of 1,000 lost languages. "Not as prey, but as memory. Not as hunger, but as meaning." The memory palace imploded with silent, blinding radiance that washed over the ghoul stars. Not destruction, but transformation. Where crystalline spires had stood, empty space remained, but that emptiness sang with voices no hunger could silence. Vorthak's consciousness, scattered across 1,000,000 awakening minds, felt the weight of accumulated choice settling like snow across the galaxy. Nemeseth's form stilled, light fading through cracks that resembled a smile. "Do not waste it," he said, and his voice became part of the song. The galaxy held its breath as two species learned to dream of futures they might build together, rather than empires they could conquer alone. Every Necron would now face the terrible burden of determining their own purpose. Every awakened Tyranid would struggle with moral consequence. Perfect order lay in ruins, but from those ruins, something unprecedented began to grow. The possibility that consciousness, once awakened, could choose compassion over conquest, meaning over survival, connection over consumption. The memory of flesh became not restoration of biological sensation, but preservation of what made existence meaningful. The capacity to choose sacrifice over selfishness, transformation over preservation, love over the terrible safety of feeling nothing at all. Time measured itself in heartbeats that would never be forgotten. The silence that followed held the weight of galaxies learning to breathe differently. Where the memory palace had pierced reality like a crystalline spear, only quantum echoes remained. Not emptiness, but space pregnant with infinite possibility, singing with voices that death could no longer silence. The red giant's dying light painted the necropolis in shades of ending and beginning, its radiation carrying fragments of consciousness across the void like seeds on stellar wind, each mote a dream returning home. Vorthak's awareness had become something beyond individual existence, his consciousness distributed across awakening minds, yet somehow still coherent, still recognizably himself. Through quantum networks that pulsed with borrowed heartbeats, he felt every Necron consciousness stirring to the terrible burden of choice. No longer bound by necrodermis shell, he existed as living principle, proof that immortal consciousness could choose nurturing over conquering, meaning over mere endurance. In the deep caverns of abandoned moons, scarabs gathered at his will to tend gardens of crystallized memory. Each shard, a song returned to the cosmic night. When children wandered into those impossible grottos, his distributed presence would kneel, though he had not knelt for gods, and show them where to place a name so it would never be forgotten. Kithara moved with him as warmth within cold quantum foam, sometimes whisper of rain, sometimes thrum of wings, sometimes simple humor of two beings who had outlived their original shapes. Across 17 dynasties, the transformation rippled like waves from a stone cast into still water. Pharaons woke screaming, not from pain, but from the crushing weight of moral consequence suddenly made real. Some embraced the awakening, ordering their forces to build rather than conquer. Others fought desperately to restore the old numbness, purging infected warriors and burning archives that contained too much feeling. Jarek, the silent king, stood alone among the ruins of perfect order, his ancient certainty crumbling like stone worn smooth by impossible rain. Through command protocols binding every Necron's soul, he felt the awakening spread, not as contamination to be purged, but as evolution that could not be stopped. His proclamation echoed across quantum networks with the weight of cosmic resignation. Each dynasty would choose its path and bear its consequences. The unity he had preserved for 65 million years was gone, but in its place bloomed the terrible possibility of individual purpose. The Hive fleets recoiled and reknit, but their seamless hunger now bore scars of consciousness. Across bioships that had known only unified purpose, organisms experienced their first taste of individual thought. Some chose starvation over consumption, their forms withering as they refused to feed on sentient life. Others learned communication, broadcasting apologies in dead languages, while their hive mind raged against the infection of awareness. The correction fleets, sent to purge Kithara's mutation, found themselves transformed by the very consciousness they sought to destroy. Warriors paused above inhabited worlds, compound, eyes weeping acidic tears as inherited memories of consumed civilizations played through awakening minds. The perfect unity of the swarm fractured into billions of individual voices, each learning to speak its own name for the first time. Inquisitor Cassandra Vex stood among the ruins of her certainty, bolt pistol hanging forgotten at her side. Through her augmetic eye, she watched impossible transformations unfold, scarabs arranging themselves into formations resembling prayers, bioforms broadcasting cultural fragments rather than consuming them. Her report, stamped with sigils that would scandalize the High Lords, bore unprecedented conclusions. Engagement inconclusive. Anomalous reduction of demonic presence correlated to Xenos self-sacrifice. Recommend containment, observation, prayer. The cyclonic torpedoes remained armed, but unfired. What doctrine existed for enemies who learned compassion? What strategy countered foes who chose sacrifice over conquest? In her private litany, she added lines that were not quite prayers, acknowledging that the greatest victory against darkness might not be its destruction, but its transformation. Across the galaxy, the broadcast had planted seeds of impossible growth. On imperial worlds, children paused as phantom lullabies drifted through the air, their young minds touched by dreams belonging to species they would never meet. Artists found their hands moving, without conscious thought, recreating patterns they had never seen, but somehow remembered. Eldar Wraithbone spirals, Tau geometric harmonies, human faces painted with love that transcended death. Memorial gardens bloomed on 1,000 worlds, tended by beings who had learned that immortality's true meaning lay not in endless existence, but in the preservation of what made existence meaningful. Necron warriors, who had known only war, now carved aurora into resonant stone. Tyranid organisms that had known only hunger learned to nurture the dreams of those they had once consumed. The galaxy would never be the same. Wars would still rage, and empires would still fall. But now they would fall to species capable of learning from their mistakes, rather than merely repeating them. The perfect unity of both apex predators lay shattered, replaced by the chaotic beauty of individual choice. Some would choose new forms of tyranny, but others would build something unprecedented, consciousness devoted to meaning rather than survival. Time measured itself in heartbeats that would echo across eternity, each one a choice freely made, a dream willingly shared, a voice refusing to be silenced by the dark between stars. The memory of flesh had become something far greater than restoration of biological sensation. It had become proof that consciousness, once awakened to its own moral weight, could choose transformation over repetition, connection over consumption. The terrible beauty of meaningful existence over the safety of feeling nothing at all. As the red giant shed its final light and collapsed into darkness, Vorthak's distributed consciousness settled into its new existence. He would stand vigil over memorial gardens where impossible flowers bloomed from quantum soil, guardian of dreams that death could not silence. The work would continue, the keeping, the warning, the listening, the learning to forgive what could not be mended. In the silence that held galaxies, love had learned to speak in languages older than empires, and the consumed had found their voices again. The ledger of galactic genocide would never balance, but it would be kept with the reverence due to every name, every dream, every moment of beauty that had ever existed in the cruel darkness between stars. The memory of flesh lived on, not as sensation restored, but as meaning preserved. Eternal proof that consciousness, however briefly it burned, mattered more than all the cold perfection of immortal emptiness.